Welcome to Face the State. I'm Susan Raff, sitting in for Dennis House this morning. Gridlock in Washington over a tax break and creating jobs. Even Democrats voted against the president, including Congressman Jim Himes. Himes is here this morning to talk about all these problems in Washington and more. Is it that simple as voting against giving people money or jobs?
Well, the Democrats didn't vote against the president, Susan. The Democrats in the House voted against a Republican House extension of the payroll tax and the unemployment insurance, which included an initiative to basically get rid of our environmental regulation, to get rid of our internal health care system. And then we had a deal in the Senate, and the Senate struck a deal that got 89, including 39 Republican senators, against 10. You don't get 89 votes in the Senate for just about anything, to extend the payroll tax cut and the unemployment insurance for 2 months. The Republicans in the House said no. Showing that they, in fact, are the folks that are willing to raise taxes for ideological reasons. They realized their mistake, and on December 23rd, in an empty chamber, they turned it around. So now we've got a 2-month extension of the payroll tax reduction and a 2-month extension of unemployment insurance for people who don't have jobs. Our challenge now is to go back and extend it beyond 2 months to a full year, not just for the human reasons of helping people, have a little bit more money in their wallet and helping the unemployed put food on the table, but to help the economy, to give people the dollars that they can go out and spend and help what is a very hesitant recovery continue.
What did the Republicans put in that legislation that you found it just was not doable?
Well, as I said, on the House bill that not only did the House Democrats vote against, but the Senate said it was a non-starter, they put in all sorts of things to attract the Tea Partiers to it. The Tea Partiers didn't want to extend unemployment insurance. They didn't want to extend the reduction in the Social Security tax. So they threw in the Keystone Pipeline and said the president has to approve it. They threw in initiatives to eliminate the regulations that keep our air and our water clean. They threw in all sorts of initiatives to try to reverse the health care reform that was done. Irrelevant, partisan, ideological things. And we just weren't going to go along with that. At the end of the day, we got a 2-month deal done that was much more reasonable. But look, the Republican charge that we've raised taxes is so beyond the facts as to be, I think the technical term is baloney. Since Barack Obama arrived in Washington, and since I've been there in the last 3 years, through the Recovery Act, through the deal that was signed last December, taxes repeatedly cut to the point where, and this is a fact, the federal tax burden on the American public is lower today than it has been since the late 1950s.
Wasn't there something in that legislation, too, that would have cut your salary?
Cut whose salary?
Congress?
Yes, there was, which, by the way, I'm supportive of. I've taken no raises since I've been in Congress. When there was one voted through, I gave it away, and since then I've voted against any raises. So, yes, that was in there as well.
And what about the extension? I mean, why not stay through the holiday break and work out something better than just 2 months?
Well, we got the 2 months done. And again, remember which party it was in the House that didn't want to get that done. So much so that the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal called them out on it. When the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal is calling out House Republicans, that they've really gone beyond the pale. So we got that done. So now the challenge is to go back. We've got 2 months to figure out how to extend these tax breaks for the remainder of the year.
How do we go forward? I mean, I think the last time you were here on Face the State, we talked about gridlock in Washington. I think popularity certainly has plummeted with Congress. Does it give much hope that you can really work both sides and get some help for people who really need it, especially unemployment and people are out of work in this economy?
Susan, look, in a perfect world, we would do some things that if we weren't in a House that was dominated by the Tea Party, we would all agree would be smart. We're recovering, but too slowly. When I went to Congress 3 years ago, this country was losing 700,000, 800,000 jobs every month. Since we took office, we've been adding jobs, not at a satisfactory rate, but 100,000, 150,000, 200,000 jobs a month. We should double that or triple that. How would we do that? Well, let's do something that we know would be very valuable here in the state of Connecticut. Let's invest in our infrastructure, in our highways, in our airports, in our networks. How about our electrical grid, right? We all went through the blackouts. Invest in our electrical grid. What does that do? That would put electricians to work. It would put carpenters to work, operating engineers to work. The investments anyway, why not do it now when and putting money into people's pockets would help this recovery along. The Republicans said, no way, we're not going to invest in our infrastructure, and so we're in this situation of gridlock where we just unfortunately can't get some things that we know we should do done.
Let's switch gears. Redistricting here in Connecticut, both the House and the Senate could not reach an agreement. They went back and forth with different plans, which certainly has an impact on Republicans and Democrats. Republicans, I think, wanted to have a little bit more of a fair shake. Democrats didn't want that, so now it goes to the state Supreme Court, and they are the ones that decide, not us. Disappointed?
Well, you said the Republicans wanted a fair shake. Let's remember, we've got 5 districts, congressional districts in the state of Connecticut. 6 years ago, 3 of those 5 were held by Republicans. The districts haven't been changed since then. Now, it just so happens that all 5 districts are held by Democrats today, but that's not because the lines in those districts changed. So when the Republicans say they want a fair shake, look, they used to have 3 of the 5 districts. So they did what was the sort of old school way of redistricting. They proposed drastic changes, take Bridgeport out of the 4th district. Bridgeport's been in the 4th district since the 1800s, to try to make a more Republican district. This is what parties have always done in redistricting, and it has been, that's why we have gerrymandering. The answer is what California has done. California has taken the politicians out of the process and said a nonpartisan citizens commission will draw these lines. It's created chaos in California right now. You've got Democrats that have served forever primarying each other. You've got Republicans primarying each other. But you know what you're going to have in California? You're going to have districts that look a little bit like my district looks, a swing district in which both a Democrat and a Republican can compete. And the reason that's good is because if you've got a swing district, the member of Congress who represents it, they need to pay attention to everybody. They need to think about the general election, attracting independents. If I've got a safe Democratic seat, or if my buddy has a safe Republican seat, they don't worry about the general electorate. They worry about winning their primary. And we've seen in the last 2 or 3 weeks what it takes Iowa to win a primary. You got to run to your extreme, and that's not good for the country.
What about Bridgeport, which has been kind of I don't know what to call it. I mean, it's back in, it's back out. Now it's in with Greenwich. How do you balance the needs of some, towns like that where you have a city like Bridgeport so poor and Greenwich so rich? Can you balance that in one district?
Yeah, no, and it's not back in and back out. Look, the Republicans made a very partisan proposal to change, 100+ years of precedent by proposing that Bridgeport be taken out of the 4th district. It was a partisan move. But you ask a really interesting question. One of the fascinating and interesting things about representing Fairfield County is, yes, I represent New Canaan, Darien, and Greenwich, which are very wealthy communities, and Bridgeport, which is one of the poorest cities in the country. Now, people sometimes say, well, aren't they at odds with each other? Sometimes, but more often than not, the answer to that is no. Both Bridgeport and Greenwich want a stable housing market and stable financial services. The managing director at an investment bank who lost his job in Greenwich is no more happy with the financial system than is somebody who was foreclosed upon in Bridgeport. So there's a lot more common ground than you might think.
I want to talk about casinos. I know this is more of a state issue, but Massachusetts is certainly looking at that right now. Should Bridgeport have a casino? How do you feel about that?
Well, look, Massachusetts is talking about casinos. New Jersey is talking about Atlantic City. We're talking about more gambling. That can't be the answer. Now, Connecticut for a long time has made a lot of money because of our casinos, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but what we need is manufacturing jobs here, where people go to work and they exercise their skills, and actually contribute meaningful products to our economy. So let's have the conversation about casinos, but let's make it a small conversation, because if everybody's doing casinos, no state's going to have an advantage, and that is not the kind of productive manufacturing economic growth that we really, really want.
And they're not getting too much now, certainly with the economy, because people aren't gambling as much. So that nest egg, or what the state counts on, certainly is not always guaranteed.
Yeah, look, like I said, Governor Rell wanted to put Keno in, and we're talking about more casinos. Fine, let's have that conversation, but let's have it second or third or fourth after we talk about how we bring back the manufacturing that will give everybody in Connecticut a chance to be middle class.
Okay, and finally, you're running for re-election. 3 Republicans running against you. Are you in full gear, or you're gearing up? Do you think people care right now, or are they going to really just kind of hang out and chill and wait till we get closer to November?
Like every other member of Congress, I've got a 2-year term, right? And I'm about halfway through that 2 years, so it is going to be a while before I start focusing on the campaign. This country still has a lot of problems. We've got 15 million people out of work. Connecticut needs a lot of focus. Our infrastructure needs focus. Our schools need focus. I am going to focus on that stuff until we get closer to the election, when we'll have a good a good debate.
Are you worried that incumbents will have trouble?
Look, you know, it's not lost on me that Congress has a 9% approval rating. Obviously, people have lost faith in an awful lot of their leadership. And that's why it's important that we focus on schools, on infrastructure, on jobs, and not on the 2012 campaign right now. We've got big problems to work on.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us on Face the State. We'll have to hold you to your promise that you can get things done in Washington, and we'll have you back here again. How's that?
Thanks, Susan.
All right, thank you. Congressman Jim Himes.